Welcome to another edition of On the Sports Lines. And yes, I'm going to have to talk about this motherfucker for the next 4 months eventually. Do you really want to see this? Really? I don't know what drugs he's on. I don't.
Is that Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers,
yes. Are you killing him for being a Swiftie?
No, I'm killing him for looking like that at the concert. I accept all men, women, and especially Swifties. So let's talk Sunday on sports for fun. I'm Steven Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
And I'm Anthony Strait minus a strip throat this week.
Welcome to a championship edition and a Miss Sharon's 73rd birthday edition.
Happy birthday, Miss Sharon.
72.
72. Sorry, Miss Sharon, I dated you a year. But happy birthday to Anthony. Welcome to On the Sports Lines. So on this first Sunday of June, we're one game in as the quest for the Holy Grail of Larry O'Brien and the quest for the chalice of Lord Stanley are underway. And while I can lazily say as a blanket statement that it's a number 1 seed from the West going up against an 8 seed shocking East team from South Florida, actually a number 1 seed from the West in the Mountain Time Zone going up against an 8 seed shocking East team from South Florida, I will not do that. I will write more and say more for just you, the customer who is watching. Thank you for watching. We'll get to that talk in a moment. But first, the NBA Coaching Carousel is spinning, and just like Joe Mazzulla, who is staying in Boston as this week, we're not calling timeout on the carousel. As you know, the other two top 3 teams in the East needed new coaches, so they both went into the Jurassic Park subheader on Indeed and found themselves former Raptors assistant Adrian Griffin as the new Milwaukee Bucks head coach, and then Griffin's former boss, who he beat out for the job, by the way, in Milwaukee, Nick Nurse, went to the Philadelphia 76ers as their new head man. And I hope to God, I'm sorry, Jay, that Nurse's first video is him maybe taking an old tape, if they still do that, putting it in, and then showing the Kawhi Leonard Game 7 shot in 2019 and saying, this is what a champ looks like, and then leaves the room and then comes back tomorrow. The Raptors are still looking for a new head guy, and the Phoenix Suns just got their new guy in champ from just 3 years ago, Frank Vogel. They shout out to Bill Simmons, who said it was going to be the Suns' assistant for the whole entire time. That was absolutely incorrect, although he got a big raise and is now one of the highest paid assistants in the league. All right. And also, by the way, the Suns' former head coach, Monty Williams, is now the new Detroit Pistons head coach. And you know why he did that? I could think of 78 million reasons. Anyway, so with all of that, Jay, we'll start with you. Nurses in Philly. Will he cure the ills in the Sixers organization that the doc couldn't cure? So send a nurse.
As well as you wrote that, Rabbi, that stuff that's along those lines is starting to make the rounds in social media and the Philadelphia Standard media, pretty much since then. Nick Nurse is an interesting hire for the 76ers. I know he has previous history with Daryl Morey. He was hired as coach of the Rio Grande Valley Vipers back in 2011. That's the G League affiliate of the Houston Rockets, who were run by Morey at that time. But his resume from his time in Toronto doesn't scream great fit with Philly's current roster. I mean, think about it. Yeah, Nurse is a proven scheme tweaker and outside the box thinker. I mean, hell, he almost won a game against the Sixers by throwing a full court press at them in the final few minutes. He employed a boxing one against Steph Curry in the NBA Finals. So from a purely schematic standpoint, it'll be interesting to see how Nurse adjusts and adapts his schemes and principles to a team that is built completely different from what he had in Toronto. I mean, the Sixers profiles a team with very different strengths and weaknesses comparatively. As they're currently constructed, and especially if James Harden returns, they played a style of basketball way different from Nurse's Toronto teams. The Raptors look to push the pace in transition. Sixers look to play slow and more in the half court, where they executed at a high level with a scheme built around Embiid's mid-range and post-up game, which absolutely destroyed Nurse's Raptors in the playoffs this season. The Sixers, with Harden and Maxey flanking Embiid, have more high-end offensive firepower and were the best three-point shooting team in the NBA last season, while Toronto was one of the worst. They laid enough bricks from beyond the arc to build a new arena in Toronto. The Raptors play a frenetic brand of defense, looking to pressure the ball, force turnovers. Sixers played mostly drop coverage on pick and rolls and looked to funnel drivers into the paint to Embiid. I just can't see the MVP running the Raptors' aggressive help defensive scheme. And the flip side, Nurse was hesitant to play any type of drop coverage, even when he had guys manning the five, such as Jonas Valanciunas and Marc Gasol. So, that's going to be interesting to watch. And while we know that Embiid has much respect for Nurse as a head coach, despite their public tiffs, and Nurse recognizes that the Sixers are Embiid's team, the issue of how Nurse would fit with Harden is something that will bear watching if the Beard elects to return to Philly, as the two appear to be diametric opposites in terms of stylistic approach to the game. None of the things that I noted previously about Nurse's teams in Toronto, the flying around and pressuring opposing ball handlers relentlessly on the defensive end, pushing the ball up and down on the floor on the offensive end, none of those things are things that Harden, who played it close to an all-NBA level this season, has been known for at any point in his career, and definitely not since partnering with Embiid. At his press conference when he was introduced to the Philly media, Nurse initially tried to dodge the question of whether he wants Harden back, then said, quote, "I would say that James has a decision to make, and I would be very happy if he came back." Well, what else is he actually going to say if he has to say something, right? Are there lines to read between there? Who knows? But if Harden does elect to return, it'll beg the question of just how wedded to schemes and philosophies that would seem to qualify as core tenets of his coaching will Nurse be, as the characteristics I referenced above, not applying to not just Harden, but they don't apply to most of the Sixers roster, which is very squarely in win now mode as part of the process, unlike Nurse's recent teams in Toronto. The other thing about Nurse is his willingness to criticize players publicly. He's shown that he's not afraid to call out an unacceptable effort in the media. Gary Trent Jr., one of his former players in Toronto, said he would often hear Nurse's criticism in the media as opposed to face-to-face, and he's not the only example of that, which to me is not an ideal coach-player dynamic and something that may not go over well in Philly after dealing with a diplomat like Rivers, though Doc could take that too far and come off looking like his head was in the sand. Nurse does have to get better at direct communication, because while Embiid may be able to deal with it, I'm not sure it's the way to inspire Harden after some of the clunkers he put up against the Celtics. Look, can Nurse get more out of Embiid in the postseason? Can he get the Sixers to at least the conference finals, a place they were expected to visit this season, but came up short once again? From that standpoint, Nurse seems to know what he's walking into based on this quote from his presser. Here it is. "We're judged on how we play in the playoffs. It was the same in Toronto, that we hadn't played that well and certain players hadn't played that well and all those kinds of things. So the reality is that's the truth. So I would imagine from day one, we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to try to attack that. We're going to have to face it, and we're going to have to rise above it." Yeah, Nick, you absolutely will.
Two things I want to kind of accompaniment with that. First of all, the Harden comments with Nick Nurse is very boring, but what's even worse is the fact that he actually didn't say anything the first time, because the question is, do you want Harden back? He actually dodged the question, and then the reporter asked again. It's like, you didn't answer my question. Do you? What would you like Harden back on this team? The other thing is, Nurse recently wasn't in win now territory, but the year that they got Kawhi Leonard, they certainly were in win now territory. So he's dealt with that pressure before. Hasn't done it over the last few years once Leonard left. It's not like that built in excuses or anything, but he's still working with the guy like you signed Najiri is someone that means you have to kind of be in win now mode for a lot of the time. And also, Nurse wore out his welcome in Toronto. So what Gary Trent Jr. said might reply to later Nick Nurse and not necessarily earlier Nick Nurse. So we'll see what happens. I think it's a different situation.
100%.
And a lot of different expectations. And the Harden piece is obviously the next piece of the puzzle. Yep. We'll see what happens with that. There's a lot of ways you can go with that. Depends on what the free agent market really is. But that's for another time. Anthony, go whatever way you want. The Bucks hire, the Suns hire, the Pistons hire. All of the hires are available for you.
Well, I'm going to go with Monty Williams going to Detroit. And it's interesting because initially he was going to take the year off. The Pistons gave him an offer at the very beginning, the moment he was available after he was fired by the Suns, and he turned it down. Now, if he had not coached, he would still have been owed $21 million for the final 3 years of his deal with the Suns. But 6 years, $78.5 million later, where's the beat? Why not go back to coaching after a short stint? But the thing is, the contract could go to 8 years and $100 million when you include incentives. So there's a lot of that. So at $13 million a year, he is now the highest paid coach in the NBA by a good $2.5 million. You got Greg Popovich is second on that list. But if you think about this, Monty Williams, he was fired by the Suns after they lost the round 2 to the Denver Nuggets team that's in the finals right now. But you feel like he was a victim of expectations and new ownership. When you think about the job that Monty Williams has done with the Phoenix Suns, and there was some connection to the Detroit Pistons between Williams and the Pistons. GM Troy Weaver was actually part of Oklahoma City Thunder organization where Williams was an assistant coach back in the 2015-2016 season. That team won 51 games, got to the conference finals, where they lost to Golden State. There's some similarities between Monty Williams taking this job compared to the job he just left behind. In Phoenix, he took over a team that just won 19 games during the previous season, and in Detroit, he's taking over a team that won 17, arguably one of the worst teams in basketball. And you saw the gradual improvements that happened with the Suns. They won 34 games next year. Went 8-0 in the Orlando bubble. Obviously, capped off by Devin Booker's buzzer beater against a Clipper team that had championship aspirations in that 2020 bubble. And then the next season, he won Coach of the Year, 51 games. They got to the finals where they lost to Milwaukee. And then obviously this season, and obviously they won 62 games, had the best record at basketball last year. So the Pistons are definitely hoping that he can replicate that kind of success. He'll have something to work with. He'll have Jaden Ivey. He'll have a healthy Cade Cunningham going into next season. Jalen Duren is also kind of a comparison to DeAndre Ayton. A little more reliable of a big than Ayton was as far as his relationship with Monty Williams. But the Pistons also have the number 5 pick in this year's draft. So Monty Williams is actually set up to kind of replicate the same success that he had at Phoenix, but he'll also have something to build upon. Whereas in Phoenix, he had Booker, and then he brought in Chris Paul. This time, he actually has a couple of young key players to kind of deal with, and also a draft pick to kind of work with also. So Monty Williams, with the money, he has the big contract, but he won't have the expectations. Rebuilding a Pistons team that have been on a postseason since 2017, I think. That's the last postseason. 2016, actually.
2019, actually, but they were really, they haven't been really significant.
Oh, yeah, that was
postseason since the era of Hamilton, Billups, and all of that. So that's really the last time that they made any kind of splash.
Yeah, they've had some down times, that's for sure. So he'll have the money, but you won't have the lofty expectations to rebuild a team that really has been in the dark stages quite a bit since those Pistons teams in the 2000s that was basically living in the conference finals. So, if somebody paid me $78 million, convinced me to not take a year off, why wouldn't I take another coaching job? Even if it means I may not be winning right out of the gate.
I think it's more coaching in Detroit. Really, that would be the tough part about it. But I mean, that's just me. So I'm gonna go with an "I told you so" to start off my argument here. I think I told you guys last week. It's like, oh my god, all of these head coaches are getting fired, and I'm like, don't worry, they'll all find their way back to somewhere before, because that's what the NBA is. It's like, you're not a good fit. Here's $20 million. We're going to break off this relationship and go see other people. And that's literally what most of these coaching hires are. Nick Nurse wasn't out of a job for long. Monty Williams wasn't out of a job for long. Frank Vogel, who will again go to the Suns reportedly, only out of a job for a year. And after dealing with the 2021-22 Lakers, I think you need a little bit of PTSD time to deal with that so you can get the right therapy on your way to going into a very well-made situation, by the way. kind of like how the Lakers was when he got hired in 2019, to be fair. So he's in a good situation there. And all of them is just like bouncing around. But there's one that wasn't, and I love the move. And it's Adrian Griffin, the new Bucks head coach. He hasn't officially been announced yet, but he will be announced sometime this week. He has coached basically since 2008. So he has credentials. He was the assistant coach to Nick Nurse on the 2019 team. He went to high school, by the way. He went to college in Seton Hall on the 1996 team. And another coach in Shaheen Holloway, who is now the head coach of Seton Hall himself, was his teammate. Seton Hall actually has a very good coaching tree. I love the hire, and I don't think it's just a Giannis decided this was the right guy. I'm sure Giannis would have a lot of input in the whole situation, but we've seen a lot of good first-time coaches, Ime Udoka being a very good example, doing it and doing it very quickly. He played overseas. He's been on the staff of Team USA at the FIBA World Cup 2014. One of his first jobs was being a Bulls assistant coach, and he helped a young Jimmy Butler go from being a bench player in Marquette, from being the 30th pick of Marquette to being one of the stars of the league now. And one thing that is also very big is the fact that he is going to have a good coaching staff behind him. I think he is ready to be a coach, but I think one of the things you want is a good coaching staff of assistants, and he's going to have Terry Stotts reportedly there, and he's going to have James Borrego reportedly there. Both have a bunch of head coaching experience. Obviously, Stotts was with the Blazers for 9 years. Borrego was with the Hornets for 4 and got that team to the play-in twice in a row, and he was also his assistant for Greg Popovich. And also, ironically enough, the person who succeeded Jacques Vaughn in Orlando in 2015. So, again, it's like a coaching carousel. You move from one place, you move to another. You move from one place, you move to another. And what did they say is the definition of insanity? Repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This is not, however, hiring a guy who's only 48 years old, which in head coaching is pretty young for the NBA, is a pretty good move. And I think I like the move for Milwaukee. I don't know how much more up they can go because we won't really know until we get to April of 2024, for God's sakes. But I kind of like the way the trajectory is going, barring injuries, of course.
Yeah, I would say this too. 2 days. Giannis signing off money to hire. It's obviously a big endorsement on Griffin's part. When we get to start playing to be on board of anything, it's definitely a plus. But also the addition of Terry Stotts, I think, really to that coaching staff is a big boom for a guy who's 48 years old, who's going to be young, but he's got that key assistant head coach now that has the experience, of dealing with a star player. Stotts coached Damian Lillard. And also CJ McCullough. So he's had experience with dealing with all-stars in a locker room. And as I said, it should be really interesting to see how things start out the first couple of months of the season, as far as player rapport and how he's able to handle the locker room in the face of any kind of adversity. You got a Bucks team that's kind of licking its wounds after having the best record and being upset in round one of the playoffs. So just from a psychological standpoint, he's got his work cut out for as far as the Milwaukee Bucks and a team that is going into next season with championship aspirations, regardless of the coaching change.
And Chris Middleton is a free agent, so that's going to be a big way to see what this team does in terms of, do they improve? Can they improve with the new NBA luxury tax rules coming around? And what's the ceiling? And that's going to be the more important part, especially for Giannis. I'm very interested to see how that ends up, because this is the first real setback of his career. Okay, guys, let's get to the NBA Finals, which, as you know, features the top-seeded West champion Denver Nuggets and the first play-in team to ever get to June basketball in the eighth-seeded Miami Heat. Shocking thing is the dichotomy of both organizations. The Heat are the underdog, but this is their 7th finals in 18 years, and Spoelstra's 2nd in 4 in the post-Wade and LeBron era. And then the Nuggets, in the Lord name of David Thompson, Alex English, Carmelo Anthony, spoiler alert, we'll talk about him later on, and future Nugget legend and Hall of Famer Danilo Gallinari. They are in their finals debut as Denver won a fourth straight game one in this postseason on Thursday, winning 104-93. Score not as good as it actually seemed to be in during the game. And it also prevented Miami, by the way, from winning a fourth straight game one. The two teams continue their mile-high date later tonight. So, Jay, what was your key going in for the Nuggets going into the series? How did they do in game one? And what can they do to finish that off going forward?
My key for the Nuggets coming in was their offensive efficiency, starting with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. I mean, Denver had one of the most efficient offenses in the NBA in the regular season. They were number 5 in offensive rating at 116.8. They ramped it up in the playoffs to 119.2. That's number 1 in the association. They had the second best 5-man lineup in the NBA with their starting 5, outscoring opponents by 13.5 points per 100 possessions over a sample size of 41 games and over 700 minutes. And any lineup they had where Bruce Brown came off the bench to spell either Jamal Murray, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, or Michael Porter Jr. played just as well in a similar sample size of minutes, 615. That's held up in the playoffs. Combinations using the Nuggets' top 6 players have put up that same 13.5 point per 100 advantage. They've scored 119.7 points overall per 100 possessions over their 15 playoff games coming into the finals. That's the most efficient offense a team has had through 3 rounds of the playoffs in the last 6 years, going back to when the Cavs put up 122.1 per 100 through 3 rounds in 2017. They've done it against defenses that rank 10th, 7th, and 12th in the league in the regular season. In the conference finals against the Lakers, Denver scored 15.8 points more per 100 possessions, 122.3 than the Lakers allowed through the first 2 rounds, 106.5. They ranked 3rd in the playoffs in effective field goal percentage at 55.9. First in turnover rate, committing just 11.7 per 100 possessions, down 3 from their 14.7 mark in the regular season, which was 23rd. Their assist to turnover ratio of 2.27 to 1 is the second best mark for a playoff team with at least 10 games played in the last 25 years. First and third also belong to the Nuggets. First in 2019 and third in 2021. A lot of that obviously has to do with Denver having arguably the best player on the floor in every series they've played in the person of 2-time MVP center Nikola Jokic, who's having a postseason for the ages. Dude is the 3rd player in NBA history to average a triple-double coming into the finals. First 2, Magic Johnson in 82, Wilt Chamberlain in 67. Both teams held up the Obi at the end of the series. Couple that with the fact that Denver is not getting killed on the minutes Jokic is off the floor like they were getting during the regular season. Check out these numbers. In the regular season, with Jokic averaging 33.7 minutes per game, the Nuggets were a minus 10.4 points per 100 possessions when he was off the floor. The playoffs, his minutes is up to 38.9, so that drops the amount of time Denver plays without it from 14.3 minutes down to 9.1. And with that, they're down to being only a minus 1.4 points per 100 possessions when he's off the floor. It has helped that his partner in crime, point guard Jamal Murray, who I said would be the key for them coming into the conference finals, had an epic series in the sweep of the Lakers, which was the first sweep in history and the first time Denver had ever won the conference finals in 5 trips since merging in from the ABA in 1976. Murray had one of the most efficient series in NBA history. He led all scorers at 32.5 points per game, put up a shooting slash line of 52.7% from the floor, 40.5 from 3 on 9.25 attempts per game, 95% for the line where he's 19 of 20. It's rare to put up that 50-40-90 shooting slash line with that level of scoring volume. Murray's was only the 11th time that it was done in a playoff series, while averaging at least 30 points per game, and only the 3rd time in the quarters. It's the 2nd time Murray's actually done it. He and Kevin Durant are the only ones who do it more than once. The first one, as everybody remembers, was the 2020 bubble against Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz. Murray has scored 1.25 points per possession as a pick and roll ball handler, something that is a staple of the Denver attack, according to Synergy tracking. And it's by far the best mark among 20 players with at least 50 ball handler possessions in playoffs. He leads the playoffs with 57 pull-up twos. And as we all know, when defenses sell out to stop points in the paint and stop open threes, you have to be able to score in the mid-range. Those 57 pull-up twos and his 57 for 102, 55.9 mark are the best among 33 players who attempted at least 25. He's attempted 14 more two-pointers from 18 feet and out, 13 to 34, than any other player in the playoffs. He's also shot 62 of 67 from the free throw line overall, best mark among 19 players with 50 attempts. Jokic and Murray leading the way. Denver, 122.3 points per 100 possessions in the finals. 123.3 with Murray on the floor by himself, without Jokic, 125.3 when they were on the floor together. The pair does seem to be able to flip a switch when the postseason starts. Murray's averaged 16.9 points per game in his career during the regular season. That number jumps to 25.4 in the playoffs, largest difference by any player in NBA history with at least 20 playoff games played. Jokic is second on that list, going from 20.2 in the regular season to 27.3 in the playoffs. That assist to turnover ratio I talked about earlier, Jokic has been assisted by Murray 48 times. Murray has been assisted by Jokic 36 times. Those are the most and second most assists from a player to a single teammate in the playoffs. Think about game one, guys. Continuation of Murray's efficiency and Jokic's dominant play. Murray, 26 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists. Jokic, 27 points, 10 rebounds, 14 assists, his 9th triple-double, extending the single-season postseason record. They became the second pair of teammates with 25 points and 10 assists each in a finals game per ESPN Stats and Info. First pair, Magic and James Worthy in 87. Murray's the second youngest player in the last 30 years with 25 and 10 in a finals game. Game one was his 6th straight 25-point playoff game. Check out these numbers from game one. Denver in the first half was 10 of 12 on field goals, 3 of 4 from downtown off Jokic's passes, 14 of 19 overall shooting off his passes. Denver through the first 3 quarters. Jokic and Murray scored or assisted on 69 points. Miami as a team had 63 through the first 3 quarters. They finished with 87 points scored or assisted on. Miami finished with a total of 93 points as a team. To me, that's just insane. If Denver keeps this up and they get nights like they did from other guys like Aaron Gordon to supplement the player, their 2 stars, Miami's in trouble. Think about this. Nuggets head coach Michael Malone said in his postgame presser that the team did not play a full 48 minutes. He called out how they gave up 30 points in the fourth quarter on 60% from the field, 50% from on the arc. He said they allowed way too many open threes overall, in his opinion. It's like you can't count on those guys, breaking the way they did. So if they do play at the level Malone expects, and as we've seen for the entire game, for the rest of the series, I don't see how they lose. But then again, I've counted Jimmy Butler out way too many times this postseason to bet the farm on it. I do like the Nuggets in this series, so I may go as far as to bet the back 40, but not the entire farm.
I would say gentleman's sweep is kind of likely if they play that way, and that's
Ooh, Anthony, we need to see if that holds up.
Listen, we don't.
You know how the rabbi is with predictions.
It's terrible. I would like to see a competitive series, but the way they were played in game one, hopefully that balance out, because Denver had a lot of rest going into that game, and Miami was kind of like put it all out there in game 7. Speaking of Miami, Anthony.
Well, Rabbi, and you can't take the altitude in Denver lightly. It's not easy, especially if you
not. No, I've seen that happen for years,
and then have to acclimate that. It takes about 3 days. And Miami flying out right after game 7 will kind of help. It didn't help them for game 1, but it should help them. They should be acclimatized by the time they play tonight. So to me, this is where the series really begins.
Well, I mean, the way Miami played, let's talk about it now, Anthony. Miami kind of died by the 3 on Thursday, even though Eric Spoelstra said that they don't live and die by the 3, but
they died by
it. They built a big grave for it, like the grave that they built in game 7 for Boston. But Anthony, what is the key for Miami? What was your key going in? How was it shown? And how will it affect the rest of the series?
The Miami got 1,000 deaths by the 3-pointer, the way they were bricking everything. I mean, jeez, I don't. Game one was just a strange game to watch. So maybe it's just my opinion. I mean, Denver looked so great, but they looked great in Spurs. And then Miami just slog. It's like a slog game. I think it was more like it's like a filling out process of both teams. We consider Miami literally coming off just 72 hours removed from a game 7, and Denver having not played for almost 9 days. I mean, it didn't feel like the game had much of a flow to it, and maybe it's just my opinion. But but my key for Miami was the zone defense, and it's not the traditional 2-3 that we've seen with Jim Boeheim and Syracuse teams over the years. It's more of a 1-1-3 zone where you have the guards playing high out in the perimeter and switching on screens, which kind of allows them to stay in that zone but not give up any kind of disadvantage. Was the two guys to the back are able to play more in the passing lanes. But it's been effective. Miami has really perfected that zone. It's been more of a change of pace defense for them. In the regular season, they played 21% of the defense possessions in the zone. Only Portland was the only other team in the league that even had a percentage in double digits. They played 14% of the time. In the playoffs, the Miami Heat allowed just 0.906 points per game, which is best overall in the postseason due to the length, the athleticism, and obviously the ability to interact and communicate on the zone defense has caused a lot of problems when you think about the three of the teams that they beat in the Eastern Conference against the finals were also three of the top offensive efficiency rated teams in the NBA. We saw it in Milwaukee against Milwaukee in round one, where they were held to 0.95 points per possession. Against the Knicks in round two, while the Knicks were able to have some moderate success, when the outside shots were falling, they also turned the ball over quite a bit on a high pop also. And we saw in the Boston series, 0.9 points per possession, and in games 2 and 7 in particularly, the Celtics really had a hard time dealing with the Miami zone defense. In game 1 of the finals, they only played zone defense 19 possessions and gave up 23 points, which is an acceptable 1.16 points per possession, but it's actually worse than the 1.12 that the Nuggets were averaging for the game. So obviously Denver, when they were expecting the zone, were able to get some success, particularly when Nikola Jokic being in the middle of that zone and being able to pick that zone defense apart as a playmaker, not necessarily has a scorer. Jokic only took 12 shots and pretty much got a lot of his points at the foul line. But the fact that he was able to get rebounds and be able to be a playmaker and get back of assists shows that when Denver knows the zone is coming, is when the Miami Heat is in trouble. However, when Miami did switch back to the zone, when Jokic was in the game, that was something that they didn't do in the second quarter, and what many felt they wasn't going to do because of Jokic's playmaking ability. Denver did struggle at the beginning of the quarter. Kyle Lowry was able to knock down some shots, and it did get Miami closer to kind of make it a game. But again, when Denver, Jay, you just mentioned, when Denver ability to adjust, they was able to put the game out of reach, particularly with Jokic being able to be the playmaker. You got KCP and Porter able to knock down those outside shots. Even Bowen, not noted for his outside shooting ability, able to knock down the threes. So Miami's gonna have to figure out a way to use the zone more effectively, but also to be able to mix it up in ways that the Nuggets don't see it coming so much when they allow them to adjust. And they're also gonna have to figure out a way. They're gonna have to attack Jokic on the offensive side of the basketball too. Alabama was able to get some success on those pocket passes and being closer to the paint, but they gotta get Jokic moving defensively and wear him out. I mean, if he's going to be able to sit back into some kind of drop zone defense defensively, he's going to have plenty of stamina on the offensive side of basketball too. And obviously Miami's key is Jokic on both sides of basketball. Gonna attack him offensively, defensively. They're going to have to account for him, or at the very least make him uncomfortable. And where he's catching the ball and he's a little further away from the spots that make him more comfortable, and be able to try to play the passive house a little more. Because we know Jokic, when he gets the ball, he's not always looking to score. He's looking to pass and find the open man. And Miami has to do a better job at that in game 2. Or the rest of the series, and they want to be competitive and have an outside chance of winning this series.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it, Anthony. I mean, the Nuggets were one of the best teams in the NBA against zone defenses this season, averaging well over 1.2 points per 100 possessions. So it's like, it's not like, while a lot of teams get thrown out of their rhythm when Spoelstra calls the zone, Denver doesn't. And the reason being is that, as you said, Jokic in the middle of that zone, pick your poison. You want to play drop coverage. Fine, Murray will eat you up from the outside. You play straight up and you hedge further up. Jokic will drop back. He'll find an open spot down in the post or inside. They'll lob it to him, and you're SOL from there. So this is what happens. And the question will be, and I don't know that they necessarily need to, improve the zone defense. To me, Anthony, you know this. It's a mantra. The NBA is a make or miss league. The Heat missed way too many shots in game one, and that's pretty much what they're going to have to correct.
And I finished my point with this. I think back to the 2020 finals bubble, and where Anthony Davis was able to kind of make collapse that Miami Heat defense, zone defense, and pretty much get what he wanted. Miami in the 3 previous rounds had not had to deal with a big who can score and be a playmaker.
Exactly.
Within the middle of that zone defense. So also Milwaukee, Boston, and the Knicks, respectively, are very ISO heavy teams.
Yep. Yes.
The Nuggets are very built on ball movement,
moving
without the basketball, and that's what makes the Nuggets so effectively offensively. I mean, they just took the number 1 rated defensive team in the Los Angeles Lakers and told them to shreds in 4 straight games. So it's the fact that their offense is so fluid that Miami's zone defense is going to have to make an adjustment to and take into account of the passing lanes, because it's like, hey, look, not everyone is looking to score when they touch the basketball. They're looking for that extra pass, and it's something that I'm sure Eric Spoelstra is going over with his team going into game 2.
I'm very interested to see exactly what adjustments Miami makes, because God forbid Boston and other teams don't make adjustments at all against Miami. So at least Miami can, actually.
The way I look at it is this, Rabbi. You talked about the coaching matchup between Spoelstra and Missoula coming in when we were doing our conference finals preview, and you called out that coming into that series, it would seem, at least on paper, that the Spoelstra had a decided advantage in that arena. He doesn't have that advantage here. Malone has had this team, for 9 years.
The 4th longest tenured coach against the longest tenured coach in the league.
Second longest.
Second longest. I forgot about Pop.
It's hard. I mean, I understand why you forgot about Pop. They haven't been relevant for a while, but he is still there. So and to me, that chess match between 2 veteran coaches who are very much have their finger on the pulse of their team and know what their team can and cannot do and how to adjust on any given night. Now you're going to have the old school coaching matchups that we used to see in the finals, and coaching may actually play a factor in who actually manages to advance here.
We'll see though. It's going to be very interesting. Quickly, I have Michael Porter Jr. as my X factor for the Nuggets. I mean, it's a pretty obvious one. I don't think that the Nuggets are a big 3. I think they're a big 2 because Porter has still been inconsistent a lot. He's finally healthy for the first time in 3 years, as is Murray, which is exactly why this series is what it was in game 1. Porter had a 14-13 game, and he is always a threat on both sides of the ball. The good thing about Aaron Gordon was very good in game 1, but he was so not as much of a shooting factor in game 1 that that was actually a surprise, and we'll see going forward if Gordon
took advantage of an advantageous matchup, which is what you got to do.
But the Lakers decided to basically leave him on an island, and he was terrible in that series. So I'm very curious to see if Gordon can at least keep up his shooting. And the numbers say he wouldn't. But Porter is just a guy who this postseason has finally started to get into form. 14.6 points, 8.3 rebounds a game, 2 block shots in that game 1 as well. I do want to see if Michael Porter Jr. can take over a game. He doesn't have to, which is the most important part. Because, again, you have Jokic and Murray. By the way, Jokic, use all of your fouls against you. If I were Miami, I would have literally hired like 3 7-footers put them as the number 10, 11, and 9 guy
Yeah.
in rotation and use as many fouls as possible. 18 fouls, bloody. I wouldn't say bloody up Jokic, but make Jokic earn every.
Make him work.
And because he makes the game easy. But that's what I think the Nuggets X factor is.
You gotta go on the bench. I mean, use the guy. Jeez.
It just boggles me because teams should do that with all stars like Giannis as well, and going up against Giannis for the Bucks and same with Embiid. For the Heat, I'm going to go with Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin was the MVP of the Celtics series. Let's just be complete.
Yeah. No disrespect to Jimmy, but yeah.
No disrespect. 19.3 points per game. He was 60% from the field, 48.9% from beyond the arc. Only averaged 9.6, 4.8, 1.6. Almost only 35% from three-point game. This postseason, he is 13.5 points per game, 5.6 boards. And again, he's shooting basically 45% from downtown, which is insane.
Yep.
Game one, on the other hand, and by the way, 3 years, $20.5 million. And he has an option for $7 million next season. That's pretty cheap in NBA standards. Ridiculously cheap. However, game one, kind of a struggle bus. 3 points, 4 rebounds, 1 block shot, 1 for 7 from the field. You had to figure Caleb would go down to the law of averages. And if Caleb Martin is the second best player on your team in this NBA Finals, you're going to lose. I think Bam Adebayo definitely does need to step up and play like a guy who's going to be the cornerstone of an organization and is still much younger and should be the guy who really leads the team once Jimmy Butler starts fading a little bit. But if you have a guy like Caleb Martin putting up those numbers as your third or fourth guy, you're in very, very good shape. And again, I don't know. Caleb, by the way, illness yesterday, had to miss practice, but was practicing late at night. So we'll see if he's available for game 2. But I can't believe I'm saying the phrase. If Caleb Martin doesn't play, the Heat probably don't win. That's the most important.
What's the level of availability for Tyler Hero? Supposedly,
so Spoelstra kind of downplayed that, and I don't know if playing Hero in game 2 would be a really good idea.
Might make more sense to play him in their first home game. It would make more sense to
play him, and he wouldn't have to play until Wednesday. It's tough though putting in somebody like that in that much of a situation. The only time I've really seen anybody jump into that situation was Jameer Nelson with the Magic way back in 2009 in the NBA Finals. So I don't really think Hero would make too much of a difference in this series. The big thing would be you got another scorer on the court, but you need literally 100% Hero on the offensive end, because on the defensive end, you're gonna even if you get 100% Hero, it's not great. So it's gonna be very
better than Duncan Robinson, but that's a low bar.
You don't have a lot of you have a lot of good shooters on that side of the ball, but again, it's the Heat philosophy that's kind of taken them this far team-wise. Again, how many teams get to the NBA Finals without their third best player and probably their second best scorer? We'll see what happens in this game number 2, but it's going to be very interesting. The undrafted guys of the Heat, a lot of people are talking about them. That's what I really want to see, but just go back to the level they were against Boston. Don't know if it could happen, but if they can, this is going to be a very good series.
You know what? Another thing too is I think I like Miami's attitude. Jimmy Butler mentioned they asked him pretty much how the team was going to adjust to game 2, and he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go to an escape room. I think my teammates going to see the new Spider-Man movie." The thing is, I have to tell people this: not every athlete has to keep their mind on the sport 24/7. It is called a relaxation period for a reason, and why you have extra days off between games. I think
5 days off between finals games, so you should.
Yeah, you know what? There's nothing more draining or mentally challenging to get out of the escape room. My anxiety is not going to allow me to be in one in the first place. But I mean, I think Miami did a little more prepared for game 2. I do think that the legs were just not there. What might be a reason why they missed so many shots and having to adjust to the high altitude. Whereas on the flip side, Denver looked really good for a team that hadn't played for almost 2 weeks, and now they got their legs under, get an extra couple of days off, and now have some game film to kind of go back and pick apart what exactly they didn't get correctly. So game 2 I think it's going to be it's the swing game in the series. If Miami can steal one, we have a series. If Denver goes up 2-0, this series is not going past game 5 because I just think the Nuggets are too good of a team to and with very little flaws that to give away games if you have an opportunity to get one of these 2 games on the road.
Yeah, it's funny, Rabbi. We talk about rest versus rust every time we do any playoff show during any point. During our sports calendar year, I came across an interesting stat. Teams that have at least 5 days of rest coming into the NBA Finals and are the home team, ironically enough, they're 8-1. So go figure.
Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting way to see, and we'll see what happens. Let's hope we have a good NBA Finals. All right. The NHL Stanley Cup's final act, ironically enough, another rest versus rust situation, except 10 days versus 5 days, versus 4 days. But 2 teams are in the Stanley Cup finals. Both are on their second attempt to win their first Stanley Cup chalice for the very first time. So this is the Florida Panthers' second Eastern Conference championship in 28 seasons. For the Las Vegas Golden Knights, it's their second Western Conference championship in 6 of existence. Faster than you can say, Mommy, why is Matthew Tkachuk leaving the game? The Panthers fell to the sword of the Golden Knights in game 1, 5-2. Game 2 is Monday, tomorrow, whatever you call it, whenever you watch this show, it's on Monday. Anthony, job done for the Golden Knights in game 1. What was your key going in, and how did the Knights finish off their epic quest? I feel like I'm in medieval times here. With a Stanley Cup trophy.
Well, they kind of went medieval on the Panthers last night. So,
by the way, and don't include the having the great opening.
Wasn't going to.
I'm not doing that.
No, oh my God, what was that?
It's the Golden Knights. It's every Golden Knights game.
Okay, and you wonder why that team became one of my sentimental favorites outside of being a Rangers
really
fan.
Fun.
Okay. I was at the very first home game, by the way, in 2017 when they beat the Buffalo Sabres in overtime. And it's a leadway into my point. Jack Eichel is the guy I was focusing on, who was a former Buffalo Sabre, 6 seasons with the team, did not make the playoffs, was traded to the Golden Knights. Obviously, he dealt with injuries, particularly to his neck, that kept him out for much part of the 2017-2018 season. Came back, scored 25 goals, 14 goals for the team in 34 games last season, but the Knights did not make the playoffs. So obviously, this is year 9, and he's finally in his first postseason appearance. And he's actually played well. He's led the team in the regular season with 66 points, 27 goals, 39 assists. In 67 games, he's leading the team with 18 points in the postseason, 6 goals, 12 assists in 17 games. However, he has not scored a goal since game 6 in round 2 against Edmonton. But the problem, the caveat for the Golden Knights is they haven't needed him to score an awful lot so far in the playoffs because they've had the most balanced scoring attack of any team in the postseason. Look at this rundown. 7 players with at least 11 points. Eichel went 18. Jonathan Marchessault was 17. Barbashev with 15. Mark Stone with 15. Carlson with 14 points. Chandler Stevenson with 14 points. Smith has 11. The Golden Knights scored most of the goals at even strength with an 18.5% efficiency on the power play. So they have just not been good. They've been good from literally all participants involved. In game 1, Eichel was a key, got a couple of assists in the third period. 2 of the 3 goals for the Golden Knights have put that game out of reach after it wins the third period tied 2-2. And for the Golden Knights to win, though, as good as Jack Eichel has been as far as setting other players up, they do want their key guy to find the back of the net at some point. I do feel like for a Florida Panthers team that's been so good defensively throughout this postseason, Eichel's gonna have to contribute to a couple of goals. The fact that they have won a playoff series without him even scoring a goal as something a walkable feat. Then again, the Golden Knights are on their 5th goalie in this season also. So they have done a lot of games that have been outside the norm. And yet here they are with a 1-0 lead going into game 2 Monday night. But Jack Eichel is going to have to contribute some goals and be more of an offensive presence on that end. They only going into that 3rd period, him and Mark Stone combined only had a couple of shot opportunities, scoring chances. So they're gonna have to. He's gonna have to be a little more aggressive, at least putting the puck on net. At the very least, giving himself a chance to score some more goals. But right now, when you look at the Golden Knights and the way they've been able to get that balance scoring without Eichel's contributions, they're sitting in a good spot right now. But Eichel definitely being able to get his offense going is going to give them a great advantage going into game 2 and the rest of the series.
Well, what was interesting to me, Anthony, is that is something that Wayne Gretzky said during the first intermission, where Eichel hadn't scored yet, but Gretzky liked the way he was playing, the way he was so heavily involved in the offense, the way he was carrying the puck and spent time on puck possession for them in that first period. So, I mean, obviously Gretz knows a little bit about hockey. So I guess, it's not surprising that translated into goals, but yeah, you're right. I mean, the spotlight was on him. It's been on him all playoffs. And, if there's one guy that they kind of need to step up and, light the lamp, on the biggest stage of the hockey season, it's Eichel, and, off to a good start.
One thing about that team, though, is nobody on that team had more than 60 points this year. So this is a team that is well-balanced. This is a team that has the most depth, especially out of any Western Conference team, and it's one of the reasons why they are where they are right now. All right.
Yeah. And Rabbi Rented, it helps, because depth does matter. And, when there's no real drop off between even say your first and your fourth lines, in the grind of potentially a 7-game Stanley Cup finals or the grind of the entire Stanley Cup playoffs, that's huge. But I firmly believe this. I've said it before and I'll continue to say it. When you reach that final round, your stars have to play like stars.
Yeah, that is true. But again, no star on this team, which is one of the reasons why they're here and finally having the same playoff success as they had in their inaugural season. The Florida Panthers have a lot of stars, Jay, and only have the best American-born player right now in the NHL on their team. But
and he can manage to stay on the ice.
That was we'll talk about that in a second. But what is your key going in for Florida? How did they do in game 1, and what is going to do the rest of the series?
Well, you look. I mean, it may be the captain obvious key for the Panthers, but it's their goalie Sergei Bobrovsky. And can he keep this heater going? And just because it's the captain obvious key doesn't make it any less correct based on what happened in the conference finals. Look, we all know the story by now. Regular season, Bobrovsky went 24-20-3 in 50 games, 49 starts, 307 goals against, 901 save percentage. Started the season in an open competition with Spencer Knight to be the team's #1 netminder. Lost his grip on that #1 spot at various points. And overall, since he's come to South Florida, definitive drop in his numbers. 4 seasons with the Panthers. 2.97 goals against, 905 save percentage in 185 games, down from 2.41 goals against, 921 save percentage in his 7 seasons in Columbus, where he also won a pair of Vezina trophies. Look, he replaced Alex Lyon in game 3 of the first round against Boston, and this is where this season's legend began. After having not played from March 28 to April 20, it's a 3-week span. He allowed 5 goals on 30 shots in a 6-2 loss to put the Bruins up 3-1 in the best of 7. Panthers are 1 loss away from elimination. What does he do? He comes back the next game, saves 44 of 47 shots in a 4-3 overtime win in game 5, and the whole standing on his head began. Lost only once since, 2-1 in game 4 against the Maple Leafs in the second round. Has stopped 438 of 465 shots since that's game 4 against the Bruins. That's an insane 942 save percentage, including 63 of 65 shots in the 3-2 quadruple overtime game 1 winner in the conference finals, a series in which he allowed just 6 goals in 4 games against Carolina. He's saved 19.4 goals above expected in these playoffs. It's the third highest by a goalie in the playoffs since the stat started being kept in 2008. NHL is a little behind on next gen stats. Those 19.4 goals saved above expected are more than the next three goalies combined. Those three guys are at 17.8. Earned a 943 per save percentage against the Leaf while saving 9.4 goals above expected, and a 967 save percentage against the Hurricanes with 12.8 save goals above expected. Stood on his head, stealing a pair of series that should have been a lot closer than they actually were. When one goal either way could have decided any game or even every game, he was the difference, and he needs to continue to be that difference against Las Vegas. Overall, playing some of the best hockey of his career this postseason, and that's saying something about a goalie who has those 2 Vezina trophies on his resume. Not only has he topped his own previous best performance, he's steadily gotten better as the playoffs have gone on. What he did in Eastern Conference Finals, 4-0 record, 966 save percentage, 1.12 goals against, plus his first ever postseason shutout. It's why the Panthers are in the Stanley Cup Finals. The 3 goals he allowed in Game 4, most he'd given up since that first round game against Boston, as I said, comes into the last round of the playoffs, 11-2 record, 2.21 goals against, 935 save percentage in 14 games, 13 starts. He's a legitimate Conn Smythe Trophy candidate as playoff MVP. I talked about good Bob versus bad Bob for Florida in our conference finals preview. So we know what the expectations are for him and how the Panthers' fortunes can rise and fall based on which version of him, is between the pipes on any given night. He gave up 4 goals on 33 shots. That's an 879 save percentage and a 407 goals against in the Game 1 loss. So his postseason heater, is it over? Who knows? Or is this simply a case of rust versus rest due to the Panthers, was it 10-day layoff, Rabbi?
It was 9 days technically.
9 days. There you go. Either way, we saw a glaring example of bad Bob last night, and the Panthers' chances of taking home Lord Stanley's chalice will take a nosedive unless if good Bob doesn't show up for this series, starting with Game 2.
Okay, trivia question. One time in the modern era,
Define modern era.
Since 2000, I'll give you a hint.
Since the turn of the century, you're saying?
Yes. A losing Stanley Cup Finals player has won the Conn Smythe. Who is it? Should be easy.
Oh, wow. Wait, I know this. Crap, I know this.
You get a minute because we're, on air and dead air.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Anthony, is it ringing a bell with you? I'm going to kick myself when the rabbi tells me because.
No, I mean, that's ringing a bell.
Go ahead. I'm going to.
Sebastian Jaguar of the.
There you go. Right.
2003 against the Devils. And
Jiggy.
This has some. If Bobrovsky has some good games, even if they lose this series, I would even put him and Kachuk over anybody on the Golden Knights. Just again. Because, as I mentioned, the Golden Knights do not have a lot of stars. I mean, they have
their fan base will argue Jack Eichel to that point.
Yeah, but Eichel has been pretty good. But Jonathan Marchessault is, I think, the player on that team that's got the first goal.
He's their leading point getter in the playoffs so far.
Leading point getter in the playoffs, been a Golden Knight since the beginning. So I think he is
the original Misfits.
Yep, big key. 10 playoff goals in his last 11 contests. +8, +14, which is good playing on the top line. 18 points in those last 11 contests, 65 shots on net, and 49 hits. So if you're looking for a guy who, like I said, there is no real leader, I think, on this team. And one of the big things that was going into this postseason is the Golden Knights, since they made their Stanley Cup run in 2018, they've always been a win-now type team. They've always been the team that needed that big trade deadline move, regardless of team chemistry. And the trade for Eichel almost killed them last year. They didn't make the playoffs last year, the only time in their 6-year existence that they haven't made the playoffs. Of course, again, 4 of those 6 years, they've made the conference finals, for God's sakes, which is insane for any organization, especially in their first 6 years. But what I'm seeing from the Golden Knights, they have stars, but they have stars who are willing to defer to other people because this is more of a team than the other Golden Knights teams have been. Again, 5 goalies this season, which is insane, though the Panthers have had 3. For the Panthers, I'm also going to go with a longtime Panther like in the name of Alexander Barkov.
Yes.
Really an X factor, but 8 different coaches, 3 different general managers in his time in Florida, has been another player who has been very key this postseason. And he had 14 points in 16 games first 3 rounds. Only had 2 shots on goal last night. Was really a bad defensive presence too. He was only on the ice in 153 minutes in rounds 2 and 3. He only let up. He was only on the ice for 1 opposing 5-on-5 goal, which is insane. But and also had 0.8 points per game in his first 3 postseasons, and was never part of a single win in the second round. And now the Panthers are. The next win they get will officially make this the greatest season that the Panthers have ever had, technically, because they got swept in 1996 against the Colorado Avalanche. So we'll see. This was going in. It was a pretty much pick-em series. So I can't see the Panthers the Panthers was very close until that third period where everything kind of fell apart for them. So we'll see what happens in game number 2 of this series. Again, that'll be on
Kachuk needs to stay on the ice.
Well, it was 4-2 when it happened. So, yeah.
Still, man.
It was kind of like Kachuk, once he gave up the turnover and that, it was kind of the death knell of that team. All right. Finally tonight, after 22.5 points and 6 rebounds per game in his career, it's a wrap for Carmelo Anthony. Yes, we know he retired 2 weeks ago. Leave us alone. Spending 7+ seasons each in Denver and New York, before 2016 happened, and had the closing act to his career in Oklahoma City, Portland, Los Angeles, and yes, y'all remember his 10-game stint in Houston? Let's not.
Yes, ironically enough, I did.
Let's not. But let's remember the good days. Anthony, how will you remember the best days of Anthony, Carmelo? Well, and by the way, person who has impersonated and gotten a like from Carmelo Anthony's former wife, Carmelo Anthony, by becoming Carmelo Anthony on Halloween. So who better to speak on Carmelo Anthony than a former Carmelo Anthony lookalike?
Well, I would say this, that you're going to see this jersey definitely hanging up in the rafters at Madison Garden at some point. Definitely. When you think of Carmelo Anthony, I think he's more synonymous with the Knicks, even though he spent his first 7 years with the Denver Nuggets. That 15 is going to Nikola Jokic. That's going up in the rafters without question. But Carmelo Anthony, look back at his career, 19 seasons, the national championship with Syracuse in 2003. Obviously, All-Star. One of only 2 3-time Olympic gold medalists. Kevin Durant is the other one. But what I think about his time with the Knicks is the fact that what made Melo so popular, even though the Knicks were not doing a lot of winning during his time, that's a whole nother topic for another day, was the fact that Carmelo Anthony kind of embraced being in New York. He's a Brooklyn native. He embraced the limelight that came with being with the Knicks. He did a lot of charitable work off the court, but on the court, he gave the Knicks some memorable moments. Obviously, you think about 2012, that memorable game against Chicago Bulls, where he hit the 3-pointer to tie the game, and then hit the game-winner 3-pointer in overtime to win that game. You think about his best season, 2012, 2013, when he actually finished second in MVP voting and got a first place vote, which kept LeBron James from being the unanimous MVP that season. Averaged 28. He led the league in scoring that season and helped the Knicks win 54 games and a division title. From that point on, and then also you think about the 62-point game against the Charlotte Bobcats in 2014. Melo was just a walking bucket waiting to happen. Offensively, if you're a long-term Knicks fan like myself, you compared him to Bernard King, and that was the guy that would come into the court and almost score whenever he wanted, at will. And Melo was definitely in that category. He finished his career with 28,289 points. Well, it's not me. I don't know what a bad
that was me. That was me. My apologies.
Oh, okay. It wasn't me. But 28,289 points. one of the 75 greatest players in NBA history, 10-time All-Star, scoring champion, 6-time All-NBA selection. And you left out his memorable stint with the Atlanta Hawks, by the way, who
About the Hawks, that's right.
who's nice enough to honor him. With,
I didn't see him in the box
send-off.
score for like games, so I forgot about that.
Yeah. But also too, and I have to bring this up because I am going to Puerto Rico next month. Melo was he fight a lot of young people, African American and in the Latino community alike. I mean, his basketball court is still in Puerto Rico. I think I took a picture of it and posted it online. But Melo, I think a lot of people focus too much on the fact that he wasn't winning during his stint with the Knicks, but they overlooked the fact that he's definitely one of the best players in the game. What he was able to do, like, it was almost like a trivia question of which Melo did you prefer? Did you prefer Knicks Melo, Hoodie Melo, Olympic Melo? But his contributions, obviously, to Team USA, definitely can't be overlooked. And my hats off to him. Eventually, we're going to see that number 7 hanging up in the rafters of the world's most famous arena. If not next season, definitely in the next few years. By the way, he is eligible for the Basketball Hall of Fame in 2027. So I don't think it's a question of if he'll get in first ballot. I think he definitely will get into the Hall of Fame the moment he is eligible.
Mitch Richmond is in the Hall of Fame, so that's not really possible. Yeah. Ben Wallace is in the
Wait, that's your bar?
Ben Wallace is in the Hall of Fame. That might be.
Hold on.
Yeah.
That might be my bar. It's only one
put
title.
Ben Wallace in the same sentence as Carmelo Anthony.
Hey, hold on now. I give you Mitch Richmond, but respect the flow, okay? Ben Wallace was a godsend.
Like, Carmelo is definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer, though. That is first.
By the way, I also have his 2016 All-Star jersey too. By the way,
Nice.
When he played the game in Toronto. By the way, that was Kobe's last All-Star game as well. So, bit of a tribute shout out there.
Jay, what are you gonna remember about Carmelo?
You know, as you gents know, I'm only a secondary Knicks fan, but I saw plenty of Melo during his tenure at the world's most famous arena, and he definitely gave, Knicks fans some hope and some entertaining nights during some not so great times. You look at his resume and his numbers, most of which Anthony already mentioned, that 19-year career. I agree with you guys. He's first ballot Hall of Famer. We'll see him in Springfield in 5 years. Those 28,289 career points are 9th on the NBA's all-time scoring list, led the NBA in scoring during that 12-13 season at 28.7 a game. NCAA champion his only season at Syracuse in 2003. 10-time All-Star, 6 All-NBA teams, won 3 golds, 08, 12, and 16, and 1 bronze in 04 for Team USA, and is the American Olympic leader in games played with 31, rebounds with 125, and he's second in a bunch of categories behind Kevin Durant, including total points, 336. He was perhaps the 3rd most important member of that redeemed team behind LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, and he was USA Basketball's 2nd leading scorer at the 2016 games. As Anthony said, and I agree with him, as do most people who cover the sport, unquestionably one of the top 75 players in NBA history. You think about what he did in Denver. Nuggets had missed the playoffs 8 straight seasons before he arrived. Hadn't won a postseason series since 1994 when they were the first number 8 seed to knock off a number 1. Or is that the other way around? I keep forgetting with that one.
I don't know.
Melo led the Nuggets to the playoffs in each of his 7 full seasons with the team, including a trip to the 2009 Western Conference Finals. Granted, the 2010 trade request that landed him in New York stung the fan base, but he was hands down one of the most talented players ever to don a Nuggets jersey. In 564 games, he averaged 24.8 points, 6.3 boards, and 3.1 dimes. And while that trade to the Knicks may have left a bad taste in the mouths of Nugget fans, Melo, unlike a lot of players who came through MSG, actually wanted to be here. He pushed to get traded to New York. Spent the prime years of his career in New York. His 24.7 points per game, 3rd highest in franchise history. Those 10,186 total points in orange and blue, or should I say blue and orange, ranked 7th most in team history. And just like in Denver, he was highly entertaining, a threat to drop huge point totals on any given night. Like those 62 against Charlotte on January 24th, 2014 that Anthony noted, it's a Knicks record. A few players in the entire history of the NBA could score like Melo could. He embraced the burdens of being in New York and took on the weight of being the face of a Knicks franchise at a time when it was harder than usual to be that face. He was the reason Knicks fans still came to MSG or tuned in from their living rooms. It's why some folk who cover the NBA, like Mike Varkanov of The Athletic, who I highly respect, as well as our own Anthony Strait, are making the case that his number 7 jersey should be retired and hung in the rafters alongside Patrick Ewing's and the other Knicks greats of the past. Not sure where I stand on that, considering who else is up there with Ewing: Dick McGuire, Walt Frazier, Willis Reed, Earl the Pearl Monroe, Dick Barnett, Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, not to mention the 613 banner for Holtzman. Those are some legendary names. Does Melo belong in that same rarefied air? As I said, I know what Anthony thinks. Me, I'm not so sure. I'm curious to see where the rabbi lands when it's his turn to chime in. Either way, Melo will likely always be loved by Knicks fans. You guys will remember this. When he was at a Knicks playoff game a few weeks ago, he was sitting front and center at MSG, got a standing ovation when his face popped up on the Jumbotron. To this day, Knicks fans remember that he came here when they desperately needed a star, and he gave them the aforementioned prime of his career. He made the Knicks watchable during some rough years, and so the fans continue to embrace him because of how he embraced them and the city. David Aldridge, the esteemed NBA columnist for The Athletic, put it best, and here's what he wrote. Anthony's career could be summed up thusly. He was a bucket for much of his career until the last few years of itinerant wandering from spot to spot, which the rabbi mentioned. Few players in the game were better at putting the brown ball through the metal hoop. He was much more than that, of course. But as far as a basketball legacy goes, that's not a bad one to have.
Yeah, absolutely not. By the way, he is going to be in the rafters at Madison Square Garden for the simple reason of he was the defining person of that era. And also because we put a lot of modern people in the rafters anyway. This is team numbers we're talking about, not necessarily league numbers. So I think I think that's a shoo-in. What I kind of am interested in is I want to work my way back.
Okay.
The Nuggets time is so interesting to me, and I don't know how this is going to be taken. The time he had with the Nuggets is, again, he made that organization relevant. They were really in the doldrums, and it was 1994 that they were the first 8 seed to be the 1 seed, and they were within 1 game, by the way, of getting to the conference finals, coming back from, by the way, a 3-0 deficit, which we almost saw again this last year. Had 28.9 points per game, 2006, 2007. Ironically enough, his worst year in points per game was the year they made the Western Conference Finals in 2009, only having 22.8 points per game, only having 22.8 points.
Well, he had some help that year.
And that's a little bit out there. But overall, I'm very curious to see, because if the Nuggets win a title this season, and they probably have a good shot at it, what do you do? Because Carmelo Anthony was the first number 15. Are you going to say that Carmelo Anthony is going to get his number raised to the rafters before Jokic's number is going to get raised to the rafters? Like, the definitive number 15 for the Nuggets is probably going to end up being Nikola Jokic now, as everything is said. So I've never seen a situation where 2 players have this success with the same number at the same time. That is something I'm really interested in. But the last thing I want to mention, and something that really has come close to me, is when you go into the Basketball Hall of Fame, you get in for all of your accomplishments, not just your. And what I remember Carmelo Anthony as, I'll remember him as a Knick, I'll remember as everything, but what I will truly remember him as Carmelo Anthony is probably someone who changed college basketball. Let me explain. He averaged 22 points and 10 rebounds in his only season in Syracuse, and was a first-place tie in the Big East. Ironically enough, not the player of the year that year. That went to Troy Bell. Who? Los College's Troy Bell. And that worked pretty well, but the stat lines of his tournament run were insane. every game over, obviously, in double digits. 17-9 in the first round, 13-8 in the second round, 18-8 in the game against Auburn. But then the numbers just go up exponentially, and you have probably one of the best runs of any college basketball player for 3 games that I've ever seen in my entire life. Goes for 20-10 in the regional final against Oklahoma. The Final Four in New Orleans, he puts up a ridiculous 33-14 against Texas in the national semifinal, and then goes for 20, 10, and 7 assists. A man who was not really known for being an assist maker.
Didn't have a single assist in that 62-point game for the Knicks.
He did it, and he had 7 assists in the title game against Kansas. And one of the funny things is he redefined the one and done era in college basketball, because when he became the first of only 3 freshman All-Americans in 30 years. Wow. That's right. There were 321 possible consensus first and second teamers, and only 1% of them were freshmen. The only 2 others in the 30 seasons that followed from 1972 till that time were Wayman Tisdale and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf / Chris Jackson. In the 20 years since Carmelo was out of Syracuse, freshmen are now had 17 consensus first team All-Americans, 15 second teamers, and you've had some of the greatest. You had 3 national players of the year who were freshmen since then: Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and Zion Williamson. In 2018, 3 of the 5 first teamers were freshmen. So Carmelo Anthony not only did what he did on the NBA court, which is, again, not to be dismissed. By the way, the only person who I think would ever have a question of what he would go into the Hall of Fame as if you had the opportunity to pick would be Kevin Durant, because I don't know if he would ever pick Oklahoma City or Golden State. I don't know if Carmelo would ever. I think Carmelo would easily consider himself a Knick, but I think a lot of people need to recognize his time as Denver was just as important. He really retransformed 2 cities. But when you look at the legacy of Carmelo Anthony, you're not just going to see the 3rd best player in the 2002-2003 draft. Maybe you will see the 3rd best player in the 2002-2003 draft. Sorry, LeBron and Wade go over him. That's just fact on that. Sorry about that. But you're going to see a man who changed all levels of basketball that he played with his talent and everything that he did. Thank you, Carmelo, for what you have done on the basketball court. You are entertaining, and I would love to see if you end up becoming a commentator, because I feel like you would be a very brutally honest commentator. Don't think you will, but I would love to see it.
Yeah. By the way, it's funny you mentioned Nikola Jokic and Melo both wearing number 15. There was another 6 degrees of separation that we have to point out. Nikola Jokic is a huge contour enthusiast. He is an enthusiast, okay?
I knew you were going to. That's right at the end of the show.
No, here's the thing. One of his favorite shows growing up was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Ironically enough, Carmelo Anthony had a cameo appearance in 2016 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. So yes, there was a connection deal.
That's not how 6 degrees of separation works, but that's okay.
It's my 6 degrees.
It's how Anthony's
works. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just letting the audience know that's not.
It's 6 degrees of cartoons. Don't worry about it.
6 degrees of anime.
Yeah.
And it all ends up back to Jamal Williams in some way, shape, or form. So, first person with an anime visor. All right. I think that's enough for us. That's enough of this championship edition of On the Sports Lines. Go get your medals. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz. Facebook.com/On the Sports Lines Live, YouTube.com/On the Sports Lines On Demand, and
our Twitter handle is @ONTH Sports Lines, where you will find the link to this show in advance of tonight's Game 2 of the NBA Finals, and check it out periodically after that. We occasionally put up some links to some interesting nuggets of sports that we think are worth your time to check out.
We're going to go make sure that it is up in advance of the Game 2 of the NBA Finals right now. Next time, we're getting closer and closer to the dog days of summer. So enjoy the weather outside, as it's not too hot right now. Good afternoon, good evening, good night from On the Sports Lines.
Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, folks.